There's a quiet mistake almost every man makes in love. It doesn't happen with shouting. It doesn't happen with betrayal. It happens in silence. It's the moment you see something that doesn't feel right. A tone, a comment, a small act of disrespect. And you tell yourself, it's not worth the fight. You swallow it. You move on. You convince yourself it's patience, maturity, understanding. But deep down it's fear. Fear of conflict, fear of loss, fear of being seen as the bad guy. And that's how it begins. Because every time you choose peace over principle, you teach her something. You teach her what she can get away with. You teach her that your silence is approval. You teach her that your boundaries are negotiable. And the more she learns that lesson, the less she respects you. Most men think love means endurance, staying no matter what. They've been told that real men don't give up. But what they were never told is that sometimes the only way to love yourself is to walk away. The truth is simple, but brutal. You don't lose respect in one big moment. You lose it in 1,000 small ones. Every time you bite your tongue. Every time you let a snide comment slide. Every time you excuse bad behavior because she's just in a mood. You think you're keeping the peace, but what you're really doing is training her to see you as disposable. Because respect doesn't die from anger. It dies from familiarity without consequence. From knowing that no matter what she says or does, you'll still be there, waiting, forgiving, understanding. But love without boundaries isn't love. It's submission. And a woman can't love a man she doesn't respect. So this video isn't about anger. It's not about revenge or control. It's about clarity. It's about remembering that the way you teach people to treat you isn't through your words. When, it's you nor you when you are tolerance. And there are things a man should never accept in a relationship, not because he's cruel, but because his soul depends on it. Disrespect disguised as humor, manipulation hidden behind guilt, emotional distance justified as self-care. All of it. Little cracks that destroy the foundation of what love was supposed to be. Because a man who accepts everything eventually becomes nothing. He loses his fire, his focus, his sense of self. And once a man forgets who he is, he becomes easy to control. By others, by emotion, by fear. So in this video, we're not going to talk about what women do wrong. We're going to talk about what you allow, what you normalize, what you silently agree to every time you avoid the truth. Because the truth doesn't destroy relationships, it defines them. And once you understand that, you'll never look at love the same way again. It always starts small. A sarcastic comment in front of her friends, a dismissive eye roll when you speak, a subtle jab that makes everyone laugh except you. And when it stings, you tell yourself the same lie every man tells himself at the beginning. That's just who she is. You call it personality. You call it humor. You call it independence. But what it really is the first sign of a crack in respect. See, a man doesn't lose control of a relationship overnight. It's not one argument or one betrayal that does it. It's death by 1,000 rationalizations. Every time you excuse bad behavior, you hand over another piece of your authority. And you do it willingly. You tell yourself, she's different. She's emotional. She didn't mean it. But deep down, something inside you knows the truth. You're not keeping the peace. You're keeping yourself from being alone. Because to call out disrespect means risking loss. And that's the one thing men fear more than being disrespected. Being abandoned. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop enforcing your boundaries to keep her is the moment she starts losing interest in you. Why? Because women don't test you to destroy you. They test you to find you. They want to feel the edge of your conviction. They want to know that your calm isn't weakness in disguise. When you say nothing, you're not showing patience, and you're showing submission. And the feminine instinct doesn't respect submission from a man. Every time you say, "That's just who she is," what she really hears is, "That's all I deserve." She might not even mean to disrespect you. Sometimes it's unconscious, a product of how modern relationships have blurred the lines between equality and entitlement. But if you don't stop it, it grows. The moment you excuse disrespect, you invite more of it. And over time, that subtle mockery turns into open disregard. The private eye rolls turn into public humiliation. The soft sarcasm turns into cold distance. And when that day comes, you'll sit there wondering how you lost her respect, not realizing it began the very first time you refused to draw the line. Because boundaries aren't walls, they're mirrors. They show people who you are, what you value, and what you will never tolerate. When you let someone cross them, you're not being understanding, you're erasing yourself. And once a man erases himself for love, he stops being the man she fell for. The truth is brutal but freeing. You don't set boundaries to control her. You set them to protect the version of you that love was drawn to in the first place. Because a woman can forgive your flaws, but she'll never forgive your weakness. Respect doesn't vanish in a single moment. It fades, quietly, gradually, like paint left out in the rain. One day, she looks at you with admiration, the next with expectation, and soon after, with indifference. But it doesn't happen because she stopped loving you. It happens because you stopped leading yourself. It begins with small things. She interrupts you mid-sentence, and you laugh it off. She makes a decision without asking, and you tell yourself it's fine. She starts talking at you instead of to you, and you let it slide. Each moment seems insignificant, harmless even. But those moments add up. They form a pattern, one that slowly teaches her she doesn't need to take you seriously. And the irony. She's not consciously trying to destroy the relationship. She's testing it. Testing you. Because the feminine doesn't trust what it can't feel. If she can push your limits without resistance, then deep down, she knows your strength is conditional. That's when admiration turns to comfort, comfort turns to control, and control turns to quiet contempt. She may still say she loves you, she might even believe it, but she no longer looks up to you. And a woman who can't look up to her man can't truly love him. Not in the way that keeps desire alive. You think you're being calm, understanding, patient, but in her eyes, you're disappearing. Every time you avoid conflict, you shrink. Every time you let her set the tone, you lose authority. Every time you try to keep the peace, you teach her that peace means submission. And here's the painful truth. Women don't respect men they can emotionally control. They might stay with them, depend on them, but they won't admire them. A man's energy sets the tone of the relationship. When his direction fades, her certainty fades with it. That's why she becomes anxious, distant, moody. Not because she wants to leave, but because she no longer feels safe in his leadership. Respect is the root of attraction. Once it's gone, everything else is just maintenance. You can buy gifts, plan trips, say the right words. But if she doesn't feel your strength, she'll slowly disconnect. And that disconnection doesn't show up as yelling or fighting. It shows up as silence. Short answers, avoided eye contact. The spark dies quietly. Long before the breakup ever happens. The lesson is simple, but hard to live. Love doesn't die from hate. It dies from tolerated disrespect. You don't rebuild attraction by doing more for her. You rebuild it by doing less of what kills it. The appeasement, the over-apology, the self-betrayal. Because respect isn't earned by words. It's maintained by the quiet power of boundaries. the kind that don't need to be announced, only enforced. Guilt is the quietest weapon in modern relationships. It doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It simply asks, if you loved me, why would you do that? And just like that, a man starts negotiating with his own instincts. At first, it feels harmless. You just want to make her happy. You want to avoid hurting her feelings. You tell yourself, it's just easier to agree. But every time you let guilt rewrite your truth, you trade authenticity for acceptance. You start apologizing for things that don't need apologies. You start explaining decisions that require no permission. You start living like you're on trial, trying to prove that you're not the villain she's implying you are. That's how manipulation works. Not always intentionally, but effectively. A woman who learns she can move you through guilt stops respecting the man beneath it. And that's not because she's cruel. It's because guilt flips the power dynamic. It turns love into leverage. It makes honesty dangerous. You stop saying what you mean because you're afraid of how she'll react. You stop holding your boundaries because they make her feel unloved. You stop leading because leadership requires the risk of disapproval. And before you realize it, you're no longer in a relationship. You're in emotional captivity. Here's the part most men don't understand. Guilt doesn't create closeness, it creates compliance. And compliance feels like connection until the resentment sets in. That's when you start pulling back quietly. Not because you stopped caring, but because you can't breathe inside a love that punishes honesty. The worst part? You start feeling guilty for noticing it. You start believing the problem is you. You start thinking maybe you are too cold, too demanding, too harsh. That maybe being a good man means accepting blame for everything. But that's the lie. Guilt was designed to make you believe that protecting your peace is selfish, that speaking truth is cruelty, that saying no means you don't love her enough. The truth is the opposite. A man who refuses to be manipulated by guilt isn't heartless, he's grounded. He's the kind of man who can love with integrity, not insecurity. Because real love doesn't demand guilt, it demands growth. It asks both people to own their emotions, not weaponize them. So the next time she says, if you loved me, you'd understand, remember, love isn't proven by compliance, it's proven by consistency. And if your peace has to die for her comfort to live, that's not love. That's control. Never let guilt turn your kindness into submission. Because the man who feels guilty for having boundaries is already halfway to losing himself. A man doesn't lose his strength in one day. It's not stolen from him. It's surrendered, piece by piece. At first, he gives in to keep the peace. Then he gives up to keep her love. And by the time he realizes how much he's lost, his reflection doesn't even look like him anymore. This is the quiet death of masculine energy, the slow erosion of conviction under the weight of accommodation. He stops deciding. He stops leading. He stops saying what he really thinks. And on the surface, it looks like harmony. No arguments, no tension, no conflict. But underneath, he's suffocating. A king who abdicated his throne in exchange for comfort. It happens to good men first, the ones who were raised to be gentle, considerate, understanding. The ones who confuse kindness with compliance. He believes that the more he gives, the more she'll love him. But what he doesn't see is that every act of self-erasure teaches her something dangerous. That his approval is more important than his authenticity. And a woman can sense when a man is living to please her. At first, it feels flattering. Then it feels heavy. Then it feels empty. Because what she really wanted was polarity. The tension between her emotion and his direction, between her chaos and his calm. When that polarity disappears, so does the attraction. He becomes predictable, safe, boring. And she starts to pull away. Not out of malice, but out of instinct. The masculine energy isn't about dominance or control. It's about direction. It's about being anchored while everything else changes. But when a man starts seeking emotional permission to lead, he loses that anchor. He becomes reactive instead of decisive, passive instead of purposeful. She begins to sense it, the subtle way he hesitates before making choices, the way his tone shifts from certainty to apology, the way he asks, "Are you okay with that?" instead of saying, "This is what we're going to do." And every time he hesitates, a small part of her respect dies. She might not say it, but she feels it. And soon, she begins to fill the space he abandoned. She leads, she decides, she directs. But she also resents it, because deep down, no woman wants to carry both energies forever. The relationship becomes inverted. She's the captain, and he's the passenger pretending to steer. That's when attraction turns to irritation, admiration turns to exhaustion, and love starts to feel like obligation. The tragedy? He thinks being agreeable will fix it. But what she wanted wasn't agreement. It was presence. A man doesn't regain respect by demanding it. He earns it again by remembering who he is, by speaking truth without apology, by leading from calm, not control. Because masculine energy doesn't die from rejection. It dies from self-abandonment. And once a man chooses peace over purpose too many times, he stops being her man and becomes her mirror. Every man has a moment he doesn't see coming. It's not the fight. It's not the breakup. It's not even the day she walks away. It's the quiet moment before all of that, when he realizes he's already lost something deeper than her. He's lost himself. It happens after years of compromise that went one step too far, after one too many apologies for things that weren't his fault, after staying silent one too many times just to keep the peace. And one day, he wakes up next to someone who doesn't even see him anymore. Not because she stopped looking, but because he stopped standing. That's the moment every man meets what I call the boundary of no return. It's the point where love becomes survival and connection becomes control, where every conversation feels like negotiation, where your peace costs your voice. You start to notice it in small ways. She no longer listens when you speak. Your opinions don't carry weight. You try to lead, but it only starts an argument. You've become the emotional janitor of the relationship, cleaning up every mess, smoothing every conflict, hoping one day she'll finally see your effort. But she won't, because effort without boundaries looks like desperation, and desperation is invisible to the feminine eye. When you reach the boundary of no return, you don't get respect back by asking for it. You get it back by walking away, not in anger, but in quiet acceptance that you've done your part. That's the hardest part for men, understanding that leaving isn't quitting. It's remembering that your peace is not negotiable. Because when you stay after your boundaries have been broken too many times, you're not being loyal. You're being loyal to your own destruction. She may cry, she may rage, she may promise to change, but deep down, both of you know the truth. Once respect is gone, love has an expiration date. The woman you once adored will start to resent the man you've become. Not because you changed, but because you stayed too long in a place where your strength no longer lived. Walking away is not revenge. It's not about proving a point. It's about reclaiming your reflection. The version of you that existed before compromise turned into self-betrayal. That's why most men don't recover from the boundary of no return, because they try to fix what only distance can heal. When you leave, it's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's understanding that peace bought with self-sacrifice isn't peace. It's quiet suffering. And when you finally let go, you don't lose love. You make room for something real, respect, honesty, and peace that doesn't demand your silence. That's the boundary every man must defend, even if it costs him everything. Because once you cross it, there's no coming back. Most men think setting boundaries means pushing people away, that it makes them cold, harsh, or selfish. But the truth is, boundaries are the purest form of love there is. Because love without boundaries isn't compassion, It's chaos. And chaos destroys everything it touches. See, when you set a boundary, you're not building a wall. You're building a framework. You're creating the conditions where love can breathe, where respect can live, and where trust can grow without fear. Boundaries don't kill connection, they protect it. Because what women crave more than comfort is certainty. And certainty comes from a man who knows where his line is and refuses to move it for validation. That's the difference between attraction and admiration. Attraction is instinct. Admiration is earned. When a man has no boundaries, he confuses the two. He becomes desirable for what he gives, but forgettable for what he allows. A man who can say no calmly, who can hold his ground without aggression, who can love without losing himself. That man radiates power. Not the loud kind, not the performative kind, but the quiet, grounded kind that says, "You can't shake me, because I know who I am." And that kind of man doesn't need to control her. He doesn't need to chase her. He doesn't even need to convince her, because his energy speaks for itself. That's why women test boundaries. Not to destroy them, but to feel them. To feel that masculine presence that says, this is how far love can go before it stops being love. When she feels that, something in her relaxes, because now she knows he won't abandon himself for her approval. And that makes her feel safe. Most men think love means saying yes to everything, but real love means saying no when it matters most. Because no defines the value of your yes. When you tell someone, "This is what I won't accept," you're also saying, "This is how deeply I respect myself and you." Boundaries aren't rejection, they're direction. They teach her how to love you correctly. Without them, love turns into control. But with them, it turns into balance, a rhythm between give and take, power and peace, fire and trust. And that's what real relationships are built on. Two people strong enough to hold their shape without losing each other in the process. A man without boundaries looks for permission to love. A man with boundaries leads love. Because he understands something most never will. You can't protect a relationship if you don't first protect the man inside it. And when he learns that, he doesn't just become a better partner, he becomes a stronger soul.